The Metropolitan Police has contacted UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson with a questionnaire to ask what he knew about alleged parties in Downing Street during coronavirus restrictions. The Premier of Ontario has declared a state of emergency as COVID demonstrations continue across the Canadian province. He said protesters could face fines or even prison if they refuse to disperse. NATO allies have been meeting to discuss Ukraine. The US has warned that a Russian invasion could happen at any time, but says there is nothing yet to indicate Vladimir Putin has decided to do so. President Biden has signed an executive order seizing $7 billion of Afghan central bank assets held in the US. Some of the money could be used to settle lawsuits brought by American victims of terror attacks.
We begin with the coronavirus situation here in Tokyo. Metropolitan officials say they confirmed more than 18,600 new cases on Friday. The figure is more than 1,000 fewer than the total from last Friday. It marks the third consecutive day of a week-on-week decline. But even though cases in the capital are falling, one expert says the nationwide peak has not yet arrived.
The current situation suggests the number of new cases in Japan is just now approaching its peak.
The number of deaths continues to rise. The total nationwide figure passed 20,000 on Friday, with 150 reported on the day. The daily figure has exceeded 100 for 5 straight days.
We must administer booster shots as quickly as possible, starting with the elderly who are at high risk of developing serious symptoms.
Across Japan, authorities reported nearly 100,000 new cases on Friday. 1,340 people were listed in serious condition, up 70 from the day before. The top diplomats of Japan, the United States, Australia, and India have held talks on ensuring a free and open Indo-Pacific region. They also discussed the ongoing crisis in Ukraine. The foreign ministers of the so-called Quad Alliance met Friday in Melbourne. They agreed to cooperate in the fields of infrastructure development and maritime security in the Indo-Pacific, with China's growing influence in the region apparently in mind.
The rules and norms that have provided a foundation for our stability and hence our prosperity are under pressure, in particular from authoritarian regimes.
We were able to reaffirm our mutual commitment to pursue the shared vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific and agree to step up practical cooperation. This is a meaningful result at an appropriate time.
We believe the only way to make that vision a reality is to deepen our engagement with allies and partners who share it. And that's exactly what the Quad is all about.
We are keen to work together to further peace and stability and economic prosperity in the Indo-Pacific through collective efforts.
The foreign ministers also expressed their concerns about Russia's massing of about 100,000 troops along its border with Ukraine. The ministers agreed to arrange a Quad summit in Japan during the first half of the year. A Chinese foreign ministry spokesperson criticized the talks. He called the meeting a tool to target China and protect U.S. influence. He added the Quad alliance destroys international solidarity and promotes confrontation. Now, the Secretary General of NATO has sent a letter to Russia's foreign minister calling for further dialogue to de-escalate tensions over Ukraine.
We are prepared to listen to Russia's concerns and ready to discuss ways to uphold and strengthen the fundamental principles of European security that we all have signed up to.
Stoltenberg said he invited Russia to join a series of meetings in the NATO-Russia Council. He also proposed mutual briefings on exercises by both sides. Stoltenberg said NATO is closely monitoring Russia's deployment in Belarus, which he called the biggest since the end of the Cold War. Forces from those countries began a joint military exercise on Thursday. NATO members are worried Moscow is mobilizing troops to invade Ukraine. Efforts continue to seek diplomatic solutions, including high-level talks between Russia, Ukraine, Germany, and France, but they've made little progress. French President Emmanuel Macron says his country will build 6 new nuclear reactors and consider commissioning 8 more. They'll be constructed and operated by a state-owned energy company. Macron said France has no option but to rely on nuclear power along with renewable energy sources if it's to achieve carbon neutrality by the year 2050. He also said the operational lifespan of existing reactors should be extended to 50 years or more as long as it's safe to do so. Macron said the 2011 Fukushima nuclear accident prompted some countries to turn their backs on nuclear energy, and his nation has failed to invest in the industry. The president called for a renaissance of France's nuclear industry. He stressed it employs 220,000 people and can be expected to add tens of thousands of new jobs. Observers say with a presidential election just 2 months away, Macron is trying to appeal to voters with plans to promote industries and create jobs. The International Testing Agency has confirmed Russian figure skater Kamila Valieva tested positive for a banned substance. It puts her continued participation in the Games in doubt. The 15-year-old is competing for the Russian Olympic Committee in Beijing. The ITA issued a statement on Friday saying she had tested positive for trimetazidine in a urine sample collected during a competition in Russia in December. The substance is banned by the World Anti-Doping Agency. Valieva helped the ROC win gold in the figure skating team event on Monday, but the following day's medal ceremony was suddenly postponed. The ITA says this is because Valieva's results arrived from a laboratory in Stockholm that same day. She was then handed a provisional suspension by the Russian Anti-Doping Agency, but it was lifted after a hearing. The ITA says the International Olympic Committee will file an appeal against the lifting of the suspension with the Court of Arbitration for Sport. The ROC is adamant Valieva should be able to continue taking part in the competition, stressing in a statement her positive test fell outside the period of the Olympic Games. It adds she's tested negative while in Beijing. Japanese snowboarder Hirano Ayumu has finally claimed gold in the men's halfpipe. The 23-year-old had won silver at the previous 2 games. Hirano landed what's called a triple cork 1440 on all 3 of his runs. The trick consists of 3 head-over-heels flips while spinning sideways 4 times. Hirano became the first athlete to achieve it in competition last December. He recorded a score of 96.00 on his 3rd run, beating Australia's Scotty James. Hirano also competed in skateboarding at last summer's Tokyo Olympics. He failed to advance to the final, but says trying the sport gave him a new sense of balance. He's been focusing exclusively on snowboarding for the past 6 months to prepare for these games.
I was able to put in the performance I'd always hoped for on my 3rd run and achieve what I've been striving for over the past 4 years.
Now, Hirano's childhood hero, American legend Shaun White, came in 4th. The 35-year-old is retiring after the Games. He won the gold medal in 2006, 2010, and 2018. White broke down in tears after the event, thanking fans and calling snowboarding the love of my life. And over in skiing, Switzerland's Lara Gut-Berami won gold in the women's Super G. It's her 2nd medal of the Games after taking bronze in the giant slalom. Defending champion Esther Ledecka of the Czech Republic finished in 5th, and U.S. star Michaela Schifrin was 9th. And those were the headlines we're following.
As hopes for diplomacy fade, the crisis in Ukraine is deepening. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan suggesting Russia could invade Ukraine before the Winter Olympics end February 20th.
We are in the window when an invasion could begin at any time, should Vladimir Putin decide to order it.
Russia is conducting massive military drills in Ukraine's northern neighbor of Belarus and in the Black Sea. With more than 100,000 Russian troops near Ukraine's borders, military analysts warn Moscow has now built up enough equipment and vehicles for a major attack.
We continue to see very troubling signs of Russian escalation, including new forces arriving at the Ukrainian border.
The Kremlin continues to deny it has plans to invade and is accusing the U.S. of a conspiracy to whip up tensions. The White House is urging the up to 15,000 Americans living in Ukraine to leave within the next 24 to 48 hours.
We want to be crystal clear on this point. Any American in Ukraine should leave as soon as possible.
Several other countries, including the UK, also telling their citizens to leave Ukraine now. After a critical round of diplomatic talks between Russia and Ukraine in Berlin Thursday failed to produce any progress, President Biden held a call today with NATO allies. The U.S. announcing it's sending 3,000 more troops to Poland, along with additional F-15 and F-16 fighter jets and naval destroyers to Eastern European NATO countries.
We continue to reinforce our eastern flank with more ships, with more planes, with more troops.
Presidents Biden and Putin are now set to speak in a phone call on Saturday. Elizabeth Schulze, ABC News, Washington.
The Super Bowl is just 2 days away, featuring a big-time matchup. Two of the top quarterbacks in the league, including Cincinnati star Joe Burrow, who is aiming for his first Super Bowl win. ABC's Kayna Whitworth is live, counting down to the big game. She is at this Super Bowl experience, downtown LA Convention Center. All right, so Kayna, what is it like there, first of all?
So I know it might look a little bit empty behind me at this present moment, but this Super Bowl experience actually opened last weekend. 40,000 people came. So they expect record numbers of people to come partake in the Super Bowl experience and to support their teams. The Cincinnati fans are starting to roll into Los Angeles, and the Los Angeles fans have a lot to be excited about because Andrew Whitworth from the Rams won the Walter Payton Man of the Year award last night at NFL Honors. Their wide receiver, Cooper Kupp, won the Offensive Player of the Year, and Joe Burrow also won the NFL's Comeback Player of the Year. And so, you know, when you have all these amazing athletes around you, you get to come to this Super Bowl experience, and then you get to embarrass yourself. And you can see your skills. Look out, Colin, you ready? So I've been trying. Woo! I've been trying really hard to make sure that I get
far from embarrassment.
Better?
That's far from embarrassment. That's strong. That's super strong.
Hold on. Let's just see. I don't know.
Look, listen,
okay,
you're hitting the board.
Ahead.
You're hitting the board. That is impressive. So you just mentioned Joe Burrow, right? This could be, he's 25 years old, first Super Bowl win, just his second year in the league. And you spoke with his high school coach. That's pretty cool. What did he tell you?
I did. You know, it was really interesting to catch up with his offensive coordinator from high school. And he told me, you know, that very quickly it was obvious that Joe Burrow was a special player. You have to keep in mind that at 15 years old, he's a sophomore in high school, and he is the starting quarterback and the leader of his team. They end up losing the state championship in his very last high school game. But he has stayed in touch with that coach, and he gifted his high school coach tickets to come watch him in the Super Bowl.
I love Joe. I love all the guys that I coach. I can't even fathom what it's going to feel like to be in that stadium and look on the field and see an Athens Bulldog, you know, at quarterback in the Super Bowl. It's I've tried to put it into words, but I don't really know how I'm going to feel.
I asked his coach, I said, you know, if you had a chance to talk to Joe Burrow before the game, what would you say? And he said, I would tell him, just go out there and be Joe.
Oh, that's good. I love seeing the high school influences. Speaking of influence, you also spoke to Burrow's family, including his dad.
Yes.
What did he have to say?
You know, his dad talked a lot about, you know, those dinner time conversations and how do you make a good man and a good leader. And really, what he wants everybody to know is that Joe represents the hardworking people of Ohio.
You know, Joe doesn't expect anything to be given to him just because he's the quarterback and he's the leader of that team. People see that he's always working hard, and so they see the results of that too, and then they want to jump on board. But again, he's not a vocal type leader, so you know there's something there too that's just hard to put your finger on.
Yeah, hard to put your finger on it. It's really those intangibles that Joe Burrow has that makes him such a phenomenal player.
Well, it's going to be a good game. So here, putting you on the spot, what's your prediction for Sunday? Give me an over-under spread. Give me something.
Okay, so after learning so much about Joe Burrow, I would say do not count him out. I know he's going to be getting a lot of pressure from the Rams defense, Aaron Donald in particular, and Von Miller, but don't count him out. So I guess I would predict a come-from-behind win for the Bengals.
All right, you heard it here. Kana Whitworth, solid prediction. I'll go place my bets now, thanks to you. Thank you, Kana.
We continue to see signs of Russian escalation, including new forces arriving at the Ukrainian border. As we've said before, we are in the window when an invasion could begin at any time should Vladimir Putin decide to order it. I will not comment on the details of our intelligence information, but I do want to be clear. It could begin during the Olympics, despite a lot of speculation that it would only happen after the Olympics. As we've said before, we are ready either way. We are ready to continue results-oriented diplomacy that addresses the security concerns of the United States, Russia, and Europe, consistent with our values and with the principle of reciprocity. We've continued to make that clear to Russia in close coordination with our European allies and partners. We are also ready to respond decisively alongside those allies and partners should Russia choose to take military action. Our response would include severe economic sanctions, with similar packages imposed by the European Union, the United Kingdom, Canada, and other countries. It would also include changes to NATO and American force posture along the eastern flank of NATO, and it would include continued support to Ukraine. The President held a secure video conference today with key allies and partners to coordinate our approach to this crisis. The participants were the UK, France, Germany, Italy, Canada, Poland, Romania, the Secretary General of NATO, and the presidents of the European Union. We have achieved a remarkable level of unity and common purpose from the broad strategy down to the technical details. If Russia proceeds, its long-term power and influence will be diminished, not enhanced, by an invasion. It will face a more determined transatlantic community. It will have to make more concessions to China. It will face massive pressure on its economy and export controls that will erode its defense industrial base. And it will face a wave of condemnation from around the world. If, on the other hand, Russia truly seeks a diplomatic outcome, it should not only say so, it should pursue that diplomatic outcome. We are prepared to do that. We have put concrete proposals on the table. They are now out there for the world to see. We're prepared to engage on them and to discuss the principles and parameters of European security with our European partners and with Russia. Whatever happens next, the West is more united than it's been in years. NATO has been strengthened. The alliance is more cohesive, more purposeful, more dynamic than at any time in recent memory. In terms of immediate next steps, President Biden and his team will remain in close contact with our allies and partners to coordinate both on the potential for diplomacy and on any response that is necessary should Putin decide to order military action. We are continuing to reduce the size of our embassy footprint in Kyiv, and I now want to take a moment to echo what both President Biden and Secretary Blinken have already said. We encourage all American citizens who remain in Ukraine to depart immediately. We want to be crystal clear on this point. Any American in Ukraine should leave as soon as possible, and in any event in the next 24 to 48 hours. We obviously cannot predict the future. We don't know exactly what is going to happen, but the risk is now high enough, and the threat is now immediate enough, that this is what prudence demands. If you stay, you are assuming risk, with no guarantee that there will be any other opportunity to leave, and no prospect of a U.S. military evacuation in the event of a Russian invasion. If a Russian attack on Ukraine proceeds, it is likely to begin with aerial bombing and missile attacks that could obviously kill civilians without regard to their nationality. A subsequent ground invasion would involve the onslaught of a massive force. With virtually no notice, communications to arrange a departure could be severed and commercial transit halted. No one would be able to count on air or rail or road departures once military action got underway. Now, again, I'm not standing here and saying what is going to happen or not happen. I'm only standing here to say that the risk is now high enough and the threat is immediate enough that prudence demands that it is the time to leave now. While commercial options and commercial rail and air service exist, while the roads are open. The president will not be putting the lives of our men and women in uniform at risk by sending them into a war zone to rescue people who could have left now but chose not to. So we are asking people to make the responsible choice.
Why did those talks in Berlin between Russia and Ukrainian negotiators fail? Is war inevitable? With us now, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East and ABC defense analyst, Mick Mulroy. Mick, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your expertise. I want to start with these sticking points in negotiations. What is the biggest problem? Does Russia honestly want to engage?
Well, Deirdre, I think that's the actual question. Whether these talks are simply to allow Russia to get into the military position to be able to do a full-scale invasion. And it looks like that is where they're heading. Terry mentioned in his report, they have troops in Belarus, they have troops on the direct border, and now they are flooding the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov with a naval armada that's both capable of blockading the ports and capable of putting a substantial assault force, their naval infantry, what we call our Marine Corps, into another front. So essentially enveloping the Ukraine with military capacity. So I do not know if diplomacy has a chance to diffuse the situation. I think we should all be hoping that's the case. But it looks now that Russia is intending to do an invasion. Whether it's a full scale or a limited, we do not know. But the buildup certainly indicates that that is likely.
So in the past few weeks, Ukrainian leaders have really been downplaying this buildup, almost saying that the U.S. has been stoking more tension than helping. What do you make of that point of view?
Well, I think that may have been some wishful thinking. They didn't want to create a scenario where people were flooding out of the Ukraine, potentially damaging their economy. But now I think it's very clear that they understand the dire circumstances they are in. They have instigated, under the Vienna documents, a request that Russia explain their military activities, and Russia, under those agreements, has 48 hours. I think it's very clear that the Ukraine understands that this is likely to happen, and that now they are full in preparation for how to oppose an invasion. And in my estimation, they are looking how will they oppose any occupation, which would be a massive insurgency, which could last for years, if not decades.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we saw activity in 2014, which many in that country are still living with. What do we know about the call this morning among Western leaders? What can the global community do at this point?
So I think the first thing they can do is be on the same sheet of music and saying all the same things, which is swift and severe sanctions immediately, whether it's a limited invasion or a full-fledged invasion. The consequences to Russia economically should be dire, and that is something that President Putin will have to calculate into his decision whether to go or not. That is the number one thing. After that, we need to decide collectively, NATO, how we're going to position ourselves to ensure that this conflict does not spread into NATO countries. I agree with President Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, that this will not stay contained in Ukraine. We're looking at potentially 5 million people leaving the Ukraine and going into countries like Poland. And then we're looking for, in any successful insurgency, they have to have a safe haven, which means they're going to go into countries neighboring the Ukraine, which will likely be NATO countries. So this has a significant chance to escalate and spread. That is what the NATO countries need to be talking about. What are they going to do to protect themselves? And then, of course, what are they going to do to support the Ukraine even after an invasion?
So, Mick, you've been in conversations when big decisions were being made in the past. So it seems like from what you're saying that people are talking about best case scenario, how do we respond? Worst case scenario, how do we respond? With the sanctions, even if Putin personally has sanctions placed upon him. There are some people who say he doesn't really care and he's prepared for this. Do you think that's true?
I think it could be true. I mean, the psychology of President Putin's been talked a lot about lately for good reason. He considers the breakup of the Soviet Union as one of the biggest catastrophes in history. He is looking to try to regain that, obviously by terrain in this case. He might not be that concerned about economic sanctions. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do it and doesn't mean they shouldn't be severe, because it has to be at least part of his calculation. Whether it will be enough to prevent him from doing this is yet to be determined, but his actions indicate, quite frankly, that they are not, because he is positioning his forces to be able to seize key, I would say, metropolitan centers in the Ukraine. And if that's the case, he is looking for a long-term occupation of that country. He, I'm sure, has understood that the consequences could be dire, not just economically, but also militarily. There's going to be a lot of, quite frankly, dead Russian soldiers that come out of this. But this is something he's going to take into his calculation. We hope that he decides not to do it. But all indications are that he is.
Nick, on one of the other points that you just mentioned as well, and I just want to make sure I heard you correctly, you're saying if there is an aggression, no matter what the size, that the rest of the neighboring countries are basically going to be facing a refugee crisis. Did I hear you correctly?
Yeah, Deidre, you did hear me correctly, and I think that is exactly what the intelligence estimate that came out last week is. They're looking at potentially 50,000 civilians being killed during the initial invasion. They're looking at 5 million displaced people going to countries like Poland, which already has a large Ukrainian ethnic group. So that's likely where they will go. This is going to spread up beyond Poland. And if you look at it from the perspective of Russia, once you invade and occupy and you have this raging insurgency, you will likely try to hit their safe haven, just like we did when we were in Afghanistan. Pakistan, particularly the tribal areas, was a safe haven for the Taliban. We had to figure out a way to deal with that. Russia will have to figure out a way to deal with the safe haven of the Ukrainian insurgency, and that safe haven is going to be a NATO country. So this is going to have a potential to rapidly take two world powers and put them in direct conflict. And so this is not something that we should just see as a Ukrainian problem, which is bad enough. This is a Europe problem. This is a NATO versus Russia problem.
Well, Mick, I am keeping my fingers crossed, as I'm sure you are, for the best case scenario. Thank you so much in the meantime for sharing your perspective, Mick Mulroy, with us there.
山田一押し新生活のパソコンは FMV で決まり FMV なら AI ノイズキャンセリングで
The smell of grass, the fierce competitiveness, the hilarious commercials, and a chance to dig into some chips and guac. The Super Bowl bringing Americans together since 1967, where in front of a partially filled crowd, Packers beating the Chiefs 35-10. Three friends were at that game. They have been to every single Super Bowl game since. That's right, every single game. They are, quote, never miss a Super Bowl club members. They are with me now. Don Chrisman, Gregory Eaton, and Tom Henschel. Thank you one and all for joining us. This is fantastic. So first of all, well, you guys even are coordinated in your wardrobes. You look great. And you have some memorabilia from some previous games. Let me ask you first, though, Tom, why did you guys start the club?
Well, this is Super Bowl 17. I meet Don and another fellow, Stan, going to see the Johnny Carson show right here in L.A. They're right in front of their wives and my wife and I. They were talking about the Super Bowl, and I says, "You've gone to every game?" I says, "I've gone to every game also." So Stan decided we're going to call it Never Miss a Super Bowl Club, the three of us.
And that's how you met?
Super Bowl 17.
That's how we met Tom, that's correct. We thought we were Stanley, who's now deceased. We thought we were the only two, and then we ran into Tom at the Carson show, and you know, he was member number 3. We're back to 3 again. We've actually had as many as 6 members over the years, but unfortunately, when you get our age, people pass away.
Well, I'm sorry for the loss, but it is great that you guys have kept the tradition going. So, Gregory, what does this mean to you? Give me one of your favorite memories.
Well, I came in, I met these guys 6 years ago. Larry, who found me on an article on the Miami paper that I'd never missed a Super Bowl, and he called me up and he said, would you like to join? And I said, sure. So it means a lot. I mean, now I got two guys that we have something in common and we respect each other, and it's like, Don and I talk to year round, and it's like something that, it's fun. It's fun, and I love to do it.
We love the game so much. I mean,
well, it's amazing. Now, Don, wait, this is your last year. What is leading you to that decision?
Well, I've had a couple of medical issues, and I'm moving a little slower. And
but we're not going to let him quit.
I'm the old guy in this club. I'll be 86 in May.
Well,
so
honestly, you look good, Don. You're doing all right.
But, if my Patriots make it next year, I may have to change that plan.
Yeah, I think you can leave room to change the plan.
Well, I want to go as long as Don's done. If I can go as long as I'm 85, I got 3 more years.
All right, so I have to somewhat break up maybe some of these good feelings, throw in this apple of discord. Do all of you agree on which one of the Super Bowls was the best?
13.
No,
and 14.
51.
51-14. And Gregory, what's your call?
14. 1 and 2.
Okay.
Back to back with the Packers.
All right, going for the classics. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, well, I really think the most important one was Super Bowl III, when Namath sprung the big upset on the Colts.
17-point underdog.
I think the Super Bowl, believe it or not, could have been a failure.
As an event?
Because a lot of sports writers were predicting the NFL was going to dominate. And, of course, in 3 and 4, the AFL won, and that made it a legitimate contest.
I kind of agree with that. Broadway Joe bragged about it all week, and that made the press. And they beat Baltimore with Bubba Smith, who I recruited, and Earl Morrow's Michigan State. So they beat 2 of my Michigan State guys. And that really, Broadway brought it to life.
Yeah, he was a big voice, big personality. I need to get a prediction from each one of you. We'll at least go with who wins. And if you feel like sticking your neck out there, tell me by how much. Don, I'm starting with you.
Cincinnati, 31, Rams, 27.
All right, you were ready for that.
I actually think the Rams are going to win by 4. But I hope the Bengals win.
Okay, all right.
Well, I'm going with the Rams because my ex-Detroit player, is there, and we didn't win it in Detroit, so that will be the first time I get to win a Super Bowl, so I'm going with the Rams.
Hey,
and I don't care what score, just to win.
Stafford could do it.
All right, well, when we watch, we will be thinking of all 3 of you. Thank you so much. Enjoy the game.
Well, thank you for having
Bengals.
us.
Go Bengals.
Go Rams.
Don, Gregory, and Tom, thank you very much. Now to that focus on the stunning inflation number. Prices are up 7.5% compared to a year ago, rising at the fastest rate in 4 decades. We are seeing prices jump in every area of American life, from filling up the tank to paying for furniture. This weekend, we are also seeing, of course, a Super Bowl. And for most people, that means you're going to spend more at the grocery store. Alexis Christopher is with me now. She is a reporter with Yahoo Finance, breaking it down for us. So, Alexis, we're talking about higher grocery charges, higher gasoline charges, higher rent. But even when people want to relax, they're going to face higher costs.
There is no relief in sight, Deirdre. I'm sorry to bring that news to you all, but you're right. I mean, we saw food prices up 7.5% last month compared to the same time last year. You now have U.S. households spending $250 more a month because of inflation. That's a big burden for a lot of households. A new survey today found that 8 out of 10 consumers now think inflation is the #1 issue facing the country right now. So no surprise to find some popular game day foods have ballooned in price, which means your Super Bowl gathering is going to cost you on average about 14% more this year. And there are a number of reasons why. We keep talking about the supply chain disruptions. We've got labor shortages, shipping delays. Add to that, Deirdre, higher costs for things like transportation and packaging. And you've got yourself a higher Super Bowl party cost.
So any advice, Alexis, for those celebrating on a budget?
Yeah, you know what? I actually just wanted to show you all some prices right now because they're kind of eye-popping in some of these popular foods. I just want to show you quickly wings. What's a good Super Bowl party without wings, right? So those prices are up 14%. That's for boneless, 26% more for bone-in. You got hamburger meat for your chili and sliders up 17%. Pork is up 7%. Chips, they're more cost effective, maybe not the healthiest choice. They're only up 1%. And even beverages, you're going to be spending more. Soda up 14%, beer up 4%. But if you're like me, Deirdre, and you like a good guac at your Super Bowl party, get ready to pay a lot more because avocado prices have doubled in the past year. Mexican avocado prices are now at a record high. And a big reason for that is transportation costs and our supply continuing to be high. You asked if you want to do this on a budget. Well, I would say hold off on a lot of the protein, go towards more of the veggies and the fruits. They are higher, but relatively speaking, not as high as some of the proteins. And also, as tempting as it is, stay away from the pre-packaged foods and those pre-cut vegetables and fruits. Do what I do. I buy it and then come home and use a little elbow grease and cut it up myself. You're going to save a little money because not only are transportation costs higher, but all that packaging also higher because of inflation.
Alexis, the thing I heard most loudly was, I can eat chips because it's good for my budget. But if we look ahead to next year, is there any kind of end in sight for these skyrocketing prices? I hope we don't have to wait till next year's Super Bowl to be looking at that. But what kind of market forces, are there any we can glean hope from in the meantime?
I'll try to leave you with the glass half full. Actually, first of all, in terms of the Super Bowl, I'd like to see my New York Giants in the game. It was a tough season. So first off, would like to see that. But prices need to come down, and we're only going to see that if inflation starts to back off. We know the Federal Reserve has already put in place a plan to raise interest rates. Some on Wall Street are expecting 5 to 7 interest rate hikes this year alone to rein in those higher prices. Lots of analysts I'm talking to believe inflation may peak around March, and we could end the year with about 3% inflation. Doesn't that sound like a bargain right about now? But only time will tell. Deirdre?
And Alexis, all right, we didn't ask you to come on and share this, but we have to ask because you're here. Who's going to win?
Oh, I have to go with the Bengals. I mean, they've never won in franchise history, right? So I'd like to see nothing against the Rams, but I'd like to see the Bengals win.
Alexis going for the underdog. We are going to take it. Alexis Christoforous, thank you as always. Good to have you with us.
Sure.
Dr. Ashton here, as always, helping us through tracking all the day's developments. And our big number today, 50. What are we talking about here, Dr. Ashton? This is a good thing. 50 states now reporting declining COVID-19 daily case averages. I don't know when was the last time we could say that all 50 states were going down, but that's great to see.
That's a great headline.
Right?
Great to see. Good to hear. Dr. Jen, the FDA, though, is set to release data on Pfizer's trial on children under 5. It could come as early as today. Yeah, so this is really where all the eyes are on this vulnerable population. So we're talking about for babies 6 months of age and up to children of 5 years of age. And Pfizer will be submitting that data. They are looking at safety and efficacy from their clinical trials. They will be submitting it to the FDA on 2 doses. However, and we've talked about this before, it is expected that if authorized, it will be a 3-dose series. The FDA Independent Advisory Panel will be meeting on Tuesday. And if they authorize this vaccine for this age group, there are 10 million doses ready to go out pending that authorization.
All right, Dr. Ashton, something a lot of folks keeping an eye on across the pond. Queen Elizabeth, her health. Her son has tested positive, so the concerns here.
So Prince Charles, 73. The Queen is 95. We know that obviously age is the single greatest risk factor for people if they become infected with COVID-19. She was exposed to Prince Charles 2 days before he tested positive, so she is at risk, and we are watching that very closely for any news from Buckingham Palace. All right, Dr. Jen, we appreciate that. And we're going to turn now to ABC's Elizabeth Schulze in Washington, D.C. with our latest headlines. Good afternoon. Happy Friday, Elizabeth.
Happy Friday to you, Amy. Let's start with the truck protests in Canada, now snarling auto production in the U.S. Bridges and other routes blocked for a fourth day by truckers nursing a number of grievances, including COVID-19 mandates. Ford says it's considering all options to get parts for some of its production facilities affected by the protests. Production hampered at a number of automaker factories in Michigan and Ontario. The Biden administration is urging Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to use federal powers to end the blockade. Homeland Security is on alert should protesters try to demonstrate at this weekend's Super Bowl. To the rising tensions overseas, the stark warning from the White House to the 10 to 15,000 Americans living in Ukraine. President Biden is urging them to leave now as international diplomatic efforts toward a negotiated solution between Russia and Ukraine appear to collapse. And as nuclear tensions escalate in Iran, the White House predicts Iran is weeks away from having enough fuel for a nuclear bomb. But analysts say it could take another year to produce such a weapon. The Biden administration has been working behind the scenes to resurrect an Obama-era nuclear agreement scrapped by the Trump administration. In the Olympic doping drama unfolding in Beijing, the Russian figure skater and teen phenom facing possible suspension after testing positive for a banned substance, a heart medication that could give athletes an unfair advantage. She's facing a hearing with game authorities. Russian officials say she should be able to stay in the games. Is there a Broadway show in your weekend plans? It's Friday, it's the weekend. The Music Man is celebrating its red carpet premiere. Big smiles from stars Hugh Jackman and Sutton Foster. The production has been years in the making, triumphing after a long COVID-19 detour. It sounds like a lot of fun. The curtain is finally rising on this classic musical. Hope you have your tickets, Amy and TJ.
I don't have them, but I'm happy to go get them. Right. Thank you, Elizabeth. Our next guest is a two-time Olympian who just won the silver medal in mogul skiing at the Winter Olympics.
Yes, she is the first American to bring home a mogul's medal since 2014. And you know what? She brought that medal with her. Here she is. She is in the building, in the studio. USA skier Jaylyn Koff. Hello.
Hi.
You know what? Just what's life been like since you got that medal around your neck?
It's been so much fun. Yeah, it's been awesome. It's still a dream right now, still just floating on it.
It's been a bit of a whirlwind. You've made a few appearances. You've been hanging out in New York. Are you ready to get back home?
Yeah, I am. I'm very happy to, just be back stateside and start like celebrating with people and hanging out with people. And yeah, cannot wait to get back home and see the family.
I bet, because that's what's been so distinguishing about the last two Olympics is that, you win and normally you have your family and your friends there with you. Right. You did have your boyfriend, though, because he was competing, correct?
Yeah, he's on the men's team with me, so he was over there with me.
Fantastic.
Really great, yeah.
I understand that it's been, it's been 8 years since the U.S. brought home a medal in this category, but I understand you actually got some words of wisdom or some advice from the two women who had won before. What did they tell you?
I talked to both Hannah and Shannon Shannon gave me some really great advice that I think really changed my time over there. One thing was just keeping a journal, writing down everything positive, amazing that was happening and just focusing solely on the good things. And the other part was just go out, leave it all out there 100%, kind of learning from her experiences. And yeah.
You said you learned from your own experience. This is your second Olympics, and you said you put so much pressure on yourself last time out. And this time around, you didn't focus so much on the result, just enjoying the experience. Would you really have, you still had to wanted a medal, but that experience made this one different?
Yeah, of course. I think, every athlete there, every Olympian going into the games, you're dreaming of that Olympic medal. That's the goal, right, is to end up on top. But it was, last time I went in #1 bib and just so much pressure from myself, from other people, all those expectations weighing on me. And I didn't live up to those expectations, but I think that was the biggest thing I took into these games was that people didn't care how I did at the last ones, They were just there supporting me, so much love for me. And so this time around, I knew I had especially with my family not being there, like so much love from back home, you know?
That's cool.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, watching you do what you do so well is so remarkable to me. I mean, I ski a little bit. Those moguls, I'm like, moguls, no, I'm going the other way. Like, I avoid them like the plague, but this actually comes by you pretty honestly. You come from a skiing family. Your mom has some really amazing history on the moguls as well. And you mentioned them. I was reading, they were up at 3 a.m. watching you at a watch party?
Yeah, I mean, that's what our family's always been about, is just skiing and having so much fun with it. Like, that's why we all do it. And I mean, they're as much of a part as I am. Like, they've been my biggest support through all of this. And I love watching all those videos of their reactions too. It's just so good. And just like, that's what it's all about, you know?
Well, I know you want to get home and see family and friends, but what's next for you? Because you're training or competing 11 months out of the year for the most part. So do you get a break?
We have a few weeks off, but we have 3 more World Cups this year in March. So a little bit of time off to celebrate, hang out with family and friends, and then back at it.
Yeah.
Well, enjoy the time off. Look, it's been a treat to watch you all from afar and to see that medal around your neck and a smile on your face. It is an absolute pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you guys so much.
Super Bowl 56. It is on Sunday. Now, a lot of us are making plans and getting meals together, and our list of people who we're inviting over.
Yes.
Well, there's some work to be done, of course. For the second time in NFL history now, this is the second year in a row as well. One team is playing the big game on their home turf. That, of course, the Rams, and of course, this means a whole lot of security for that city.
That's right. And here to update us on the efforts to keep his city safe ahead of and during the very busy weekend is Los Angeles Police Chief Michael Moore. Welcome, Chief Moore. Thanks for being with us. I'm assuming possibly festivities might already be underway there in Los Angeles. I know it's still early, but the weekend's going to be a big one. The actual game is taking place in SoFi Stadium, which is in Inglewood, California. But I know there's a lot of collaboration among agencies going on. So give us a sense of what security is going to be like there to keep your city safe.
Thank you. And it is a great experience for Los Angeles to welcome the 56th Super Bowl. This is an effort that's been in a planning stage for more than 2 years. Now, this is state, federal, and local officials, law enforcement from the sheriffs, Inglewood Police, other police departments, certainly this department, have already deployed hundreds of officers. And on game day, this city, as well as this entire region, will be leaning forward with a highly visible workforce that will be in the areas to patrol, to ensure that the venue itself is safe, as well as to ensure that people have a secure and very enjoyable experience. So we want to welcome everyone to Los Angeles, enjoy our 85-degree weather. It's going to be record heat this year for a Super Bowl, but for Los Angeles, it's sunny and 75, as they say. So it's going to be a great time.
Well, did you say 85? Yeah. We were celebrating, Chief, because it's going to be like 55 here this weekend, and we're all breaking out shorts. So that sounds awesome there in L.A. But your department has been hit pretty hard in recent weeks, in the past month, with a lot of officers out because of quarantine and COVID. Give us the update on those numbers, and is any of that causing you to have to make some adjustments?
Well, just as you reported a few moments ago regarding all 50 states seeing a reduction and seeing COVID cases on the decline, Los Angeles has experienced the same. We were in a very serious position about 3 to 4 weeks ago, where we had hundreds of officers that were at home in quarantine, a number suffering from the coronavirus despite having a vaccine. I'm grateful that the vast majority have recovered. Now as far as patrol resources, we have less than 100 of our personnel. This is a workforce of more than 9,500 police officers, and we stand ready. We've surged our resources. We'll have more than ample supply of resources, of personnel out there, both seen and unseen, to ensure the safety and security of this event, as well as to ensure that everyone has just a great time as we all celebrate the 56th Super Bowl.
And Chief, it's not just the people who are partying there or celebrating or coming to watch the game. There's also some concerns in other areas. The Department of Homeland Security has actually warned of potential trucker protests near the Super Bowl. How concerned are you about that?
We are monitoring the Canadian situation. We are aware that there's been some aspirational remarks on social media, and we have contingencies already in place to ensure that no one is going to interrupt this, whether it be fan experience or the Super Bowl itself. whether it be truckers or other protests. We want to obviously and will support and respect First Amendment rights of everyone involved, but we're also going to ensure that no one interferes with the rights of others and that there's no violence or any type of interference with people going about their day. So we're well prepared should there be such a contingency, but I'll say that presently there's no specific or credible threat regarding a convoy here or any other risk of public safety to this Super Bowl event.
All right. Who you got on Sunday?
I've got the Rams by 4. And the Cincinnati Chief and I have a little wager. If I were to, in the unfortunate and unlikely circumstance, lose, I'm going to send some Langer's deli pastrami there. But I'm really looking forward to this, to their chili. I understand it's quite a gourmet meal, and I've already prepared the office for that. So I'm looking forward to that.
Hey, you got Matthew Stafford throwing the ball, so former UGA alum there. So I've got the Rams as well.
We're about 10 deep on options.
Yeah.
We'll be fine.
Chief Michael Moore, thank you very much. Good luck to the Rams this weekend, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Dr. Ashton has some answers to your medical questions. Here's one of the first, docs, that has to do with pets. Should we worry about our pets contracting COVID-19?
Well, there is a theoretical risk, and we've seen case reports from pretty much the beginning of the pandemic about domestic pets getting COVID-19. And initially there was concern, were they giving it to their owners or vice versa? Now the general consensus in the world of veterinary medicine and human infectious disease alike is that the humans pass it to the pets. So yes, there is a concern. The recommendations from the American Veterinary Society of Medicine say if you have COVID, you should stay away from your pet just like you would stay away from other human beings. It was hard for me to stay away from my dog when I had it. Same for you? I did not stay away from my dog when I had it. I mean, I didn't. But the good news is that if pets get it, they tend to either be asymptomatic or show very, very mild, almost non-noticeable symptoms of a runny nose. So they seem to be a little more protected than we are. Brody was all good. So was Mason. Brody was all good. All right.
You think Brody's all good?
He is. He's perfect. All right, next question. Are sweat vests and waist trainers an effective weight loss tool during workouts? You don't use them, I don't even really know what those are. So there's really no good evidence and peer-reviewed data to support this in the world of sports physiology. Something that makes you sweat more, something that trains your waist for a certain shape. Of course, there can be actual medical and physical risks to these things. You don't see elite athletes using these gimmicks for a reason, right? So if they don't need them or use them for the most part, the average everyday person doesn't either, but if you want to spend your money on them and try them, just use common sense. And if it hurts or you don't feel right, don't do it.
All right, Dr. Ashton, thank you as always. Keep the questions coming to Dr. Ashton on her Instagram at Dr. J. Ashton.
Stunning inflation number, making everyday goods like gasoline or groceries more expensive. Prices are up 7.5% compared to 1 year ago, rising at the fastest rate in 4 decades. We bring in Gregory Dacko. He is the chief economist at Ernst & Young Parthenon for more. Greg, thank you so much in advance for the time. Where are you seeing Americans feeling these effects the most?
Well, I think what we're seeing in terms of inflation dynamics is that it's hurting a lot of consumers where it hurts the most. That is in terms of food prices, in terms of energy prices, and now increasingly in terms of housing costs, rental costs. So it's a broad-based increase in inflation that is weighing on consumers' ability and desire to spend in this higher inflation environment. As you said, we are experiencing the hottest inflation we've seen in 40 years. We do expect inflation to cool over the course of 2022, but that cooling will be fairly gradual.
Fairly gradual. So as you mentioned, I mean, food, gasoline, rent, it's everywhere across the board. So the Federal Reserve has signaled that it plans to raise interest rates. So does the data point that we get today change the pace? Does it change how the Fed is going to respond?
Well, I think it does. We have already started to see some policymakers hint towards faster increase in interest rates. We've seen some policymakers suggest that a 50 basis point rate liftoff from the zero lower bound where we currently are is adequate. I would be careful because what we're seeing right now is that financial conditions are tightening, and we are seeing this tightening in financial conditions with interest rates rising ahead of the Fed as something that could actually hurt the economy. If the Fed slams the brake too rapidly, we could be in for an environment where we have the worst of both worlds, essentially higher inflation and higher interest rates. So we have to be very careful, and the Fed has to be very careful to calibrate policy in a way that does not seem like it's slamming the brakes and does not lead to a more recessionary type of environment.
Greg, what signs are you going to be watching to be reassured, if I can use that word, that the Fed is straddling these two worlds, those two strategies appropriately?
Well, I think we will have to see the type of communication that we get from Fed Chair Powell and some of the Fed governors over the next few weeks. We have the all-important March meeting in about 4 weeks' time. That is when the Fed is expected to proceed with rate liftoff. Just a couple of weeks ago, expectations were that the Fed would essentially raise rates by only 25 basis points, so not that big of an increase. But there is increased speculation that the Fed may want to go faster than that, and that's what markets are pricing in right now. And that's where I see a potential risk, because if financial conditions tighten, you get a negative effect on stock markets. It can affect business decisions to hire, to invest. And it can also affect consumers' ability to spend and buy in an environment where you have less growth. So I would be very careful as to how financial conditions evolve over the next 4 weeks.
We do hope the Fed moves it gingerly. Greg, Dago, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The concern about the royal family as Prince Charles tested positive for COVID a second time. He first had it in March 2020, and many are now concerned about the Queen's health. She recently saw Prince Charles. As of now, is not displaying any symptoms. ABC News foreign correspondent James Longman has the latest.
This morning, concern for the Queen and Prince Charles after the heir to the throne tested positive for COVID-19. A spokesperson issuing a statement saying 73-year-old Charles tested positive Thursday morning and is now self-isolating.
Of course, the first thing that everyone thought was, when did he last see the Queen? How is the Queen?
Buckingham Palace confirming Prince Charles, who attended an event at Windsor Castle Tuesday, saw his 95-year-old mother recently. The palace say Her Majesty is not displaying any symptoms at the moment, but has not said if the Queen has been tested.
With the Queen, they're of course balancing the situation where she is head of state, and there is a sense that the public does need and want to know. But at the same time, she's a very elderly lady who's entitled to a certain amount of medical privacy.
The Queen was last seen on Saturday at an event to mark 70 years on the throne.
I thought it had to be upside down for the press. As they can see. I don't matter.
It was her first public engagement since October, when she visited the hospital and was told to rest by her doctors. Her Majesty also using the start of her Platinum Jubilee to drop that royal bombshell, saying she wishes for her daughter-in-law to be known as Queen Camilla when Charles is king. And now we're hearing from Camilla about that honour for the very first time. The Duchess making those comments at an engagement she attended Thursday after she tested negative for COVID. This is the second time that Prince Charles has tested positive for the illness. The first time was back in March in 2020, before he was vaccinated. At that time, a royal aide said the prince had mild symptoms, but so far no word on how the 73-year-old is faring.
And James is with me now, live. James, how concerned are people in the UK about the Queen? I mean, thank goodness it seems that she's not displaying symptoms right now.
Yeah, hi Deirdre. Well, we don't know if she has COVID. The palace hasn't said anything along those lines, so people don't really know what to make of it at the moment. I should say on Charles, you know, if people walking by here outside Buckingham Palace were a litmus test, most people don't really seem to even know he's got COVID. And I think that just reflects a broader attitude to COVID in this country, really, which is that if you've had all three of your vaccinations, if you've had COVID before, and that is the case for Prince Charles, then there's really nothing to worry about. Now, he is a man who is in his 70s. Of course, there will be some concern for that. But I think when it comes to the Queen, the concern is that she is 95 years of age and she was recently in the hospital. So I think people will have that on their minds. But as we heard there, we still don't know if she has COVID. We don't even know if she's been tested. And then there's always this balancing act between revealing the status, the health status of the head of state, which she is, and allowing a woman of her age to have a certain degree of privacy. So we'll just have to wait and see what the palace says.
That makes sense, James. What about the recent news and really big honor for Camilla, as the Queen says that she wants her daughter-in-law to be known as Queen Camilla when Charles is king? How is the local press reacting? How are people that you speak with there reacting?
Look, I think attitudes to Camilla have certainly changed. She is seen as a hard worker, which always, you know, makes people happy in Britain, gets people on your side. The polls certainly were not favourable to her when she married Prince Charles back in 2005. In fact, they were in the minus digits. They have been creeping up slowly. The fact that the Queen now has given her blessing is huge, because the Queen, of course, is beloved by everyone. So it's kind of like, well, if the Queen is okay with it, well, we should all be okay with it. So I think people are looking forward to what the future brings. Deirdre?
Thank you very much. James Longman with us there from London. We are following the saga of the Russian figure skating phenom who tested positive for a banned substance. We bring in USA Today sports columnist and ABC News contributor Christine Brennan for more. Christine, thanks so much for joining us. So Kamila Valieva was the breakout star of these games. She landed that first quad by a woman at the Olympics, so amazing. But to what extent does this positive test mar that accomplishment?
Deirdre, I think it mars it tremendously. In fact, we found out today that the International Olympic Committee is now part of an appeal to get her basically kicked out of the Olympic Games. They do not want her to compete. This is doping at its worst. And while she's 15, and I think we're all sympathetic to her in the sense that it's hard to believe that she did this, but that her coach or other adults around her did it. You either have decided as an entity, the Olympic Games have decided that they're against doping. You're for it or you're against it. And if you're against it, you have to have penalties, and they have to be severe. And so we will see what plays out over the next few days. The women's short program is Tuesday, so that's the deadline. But the IOC has made it clear now they believe she should not be competing, that she should be suspended. And my guess would be that would then lead to the U.S. winning the gold medal in the team competition if Russia is disqualified. It's a very big deal. It's a substance that is performance enhancing. That is the very definition of cheating. And even though, again, she's 15, it's just such a terrible set of circumstances, but you've got to stick to the rules. And Russia doping, obviously, is something that has been on top of mind for 10 years now. And here we are again.
Yeah, Christine, I was going to mention that because in the past, Russian athletes have been plagued by these scandals, and they don't compete under the Russian flag as it is. And you said this has been going on for 10 years. Was that really enough of a deterrent? Because it would seem, at least in this particular instance, that the answer to that question is no.
The answer is no. You're absolutely right, Deirdre. When you keep slapping Russia on the wrist and saying, don't do that again, and then, oh, you can't have your flag or your anthem, and we can't call you Russia, even though obviously we do, but it's the Russian Olympic Committee, and that's the punishment. It's ridiculous. Frankly, the International Olympic Committee, this was a disaster waiting to happen. When you do not throw the book at a country that is cheating. We're not talking about like Lance Armstrong in the United States, which was terrible, the worst drug cheat ever. Lance was not part of a state-supported system. The country was not saying everyone dope. Russia, it is a state-supported doping system, and that started with Sochi in 2014. That's why they have been, quote unquote, banned from the Olympics, yet not banned. And here we are. If you don't really punish them, if you don't throw the book at them, they're going to come back. And sure enough, of all nations, to have this doping violation right in the middle of these Olympics, I'm sure that the Chinese organizers are just beside themselves, because right now this is exploding and basically just kind of swallowing up the Olympic Games, as often these stories do. And of course, there's other athletes, and we're talking about that. But this is a distraction and a problem that Chinese organizers did not want. And now here it is, front and center, thanks to Russia.
So do you think that the Chinese hosts are going to change the way that they're testing? Are they going to test more athletes? Do you think this is going to change something on the ground now?
Probably not. It's a great idea. I think there should be much more enhanced testing, but I think that the Olympic testing is set up, and it's actually done through the World Anti-Doping Agency and also international testing, which is very much a part of running the anti-doping for the Olympic Games. So it's all set up, and it's international in scope. But what I think this shows the International Olympic Committee is that their kind of quasi-half punishment isn't working, and Russia is just flaunting it. And now we'll see what happens. And it obviously is a story that we'll be watching all the way through the women's figure skating competition.
You're right, though, Christine. This has stolen a lot of the oxygen in the room, unfortunately. Christine Brennan, thank you.
Thank you very much, Deirdre.